8 years ago, I returned to my hometown for a reunion at the old farm. I thought it would help me find closure after a rough breakup. Growing up, that farm held great memories. But now, as I stepped onto the overgrown land, it felt different, darker. The barns leaned awkwardly, showing their age, and the house stood there like a ghost. It was just me and a few old friends. We tried to relive our childhood, sharing laughs, but something felt off. Around midnight, while everyone was chatting, I wandered into the living room. That's when I spotted a dusty diary on a shelf. It caught my eye, so I pulled it out. As I flipped through the pages, I found entries from my childhood friend Kyle. Kyle had written about a deal he made at the farm. He wished for a better life, more fun. But the wishes soured, and his entries got frantic before stopping suddenly. I felt my heart drop as I read. What had really happened to him? The whole thing felt twisted. Just then, a flickering light caught my attention. I glanced toward the hallway. My friends were still laughing in the other room, but the air chilled around me. I shook it off, telling myself it was just the wind. Then I heard whispers, soft and almost pleading, dancing around the edges of my mind. I peeked out, but only saw shadows moving in the dim light. As the night stretched on, dread wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. One by one, my friends mentioned Kyle's deal and then vanished to explore. I felt panic rising. Were they messing with me, or was something happening? I thought of Kyle and his mysterious wishes. I needed to know more. I walked into the kitchen and flipped the light switch. It flickered and went dead. My heart raced as silence wrapped around me. I hesitated, wanting to call out to my friends, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. That's when I saw a shadow dart past the edge of my vision. I whipped around, but nothing was there. Fear gripped me. I wanted to leave, but the door wouldn't budge. It was as if the farm was holding me captive. Was I losing my mind, or was this real? No matter how much I tried to convince myself, I felt an oppressive presence surrounding me. Then I heard it, a voice, low and chilling, whispering my name from the darkness. I looked around, searching for the source. There was nothing, just the silence creeping closer. My skin crawled. Why was this happening? What had Kyle done, and what did they want from me? A wave of realization crashed over me. The darkness wasn't just in my mind. It was watching. It was waiting. I could feel it lurking in the corners of the room, hungry for something. I didn't know if I could trust my own thoughts anymore. I was trapped, a pawn in a game I didn't even understand. I stumbled back, my breath caught in my throat. The whispers were getting louder, wrapping around me like a cold fog. I knew I had to find my friends, but the house farm felt impossibly large and foreboding. The only sound was the muffled laughter from the living room, but it seemed a world away. I glanced back at the kitchen door. The handle wouldn't turn, solid as stone. Panic surged through me, and I pounded my fist against the wood. "Let me out! Come on!" My voice echoed in the silence, swallowed by the dark. No response. Just then, the laughter stopped. I strained to listen. Was it my imagination, or did I hear footsteps shuffling around upstairs? My gut twisted in fear. I had to find a way out, and fast. I pulled at the kitchen window. No luck there either. I could barely see outside, but it felt like the yard was beckoning me, calling me to escape. "Guys," I shouted, my voice shaky, "are you there?" Nothing. I turned back into the room, looking for something, anything, that could help. That's when I noticed a flicker of light coming from the hallway. It was faint, but I had to move. I stepped toward it, barely making a sound. My heart raced as I approached. In the dark, the air felt thick. I could almost taste the fear wafting from the shadows. My instinct screamed at me to turn back, but I pressed forward, drawn to that light like a moth to a flame. As I reached the hallway, the light danced like fire, illuminating the dust motes swirling in the air. I stepped closer and saw it, a small lantern sitting on a table. I picked it up, feeling its warmth against my cold fingers. Somehow it calmed my racing heart, but a gnawing feeling of dread still hung over me. There was something unsettling about the way the light flickered. It felt alive. I swung it around the dark corners of the hall. That's when I saw it again, the shadow. It moved quickly, darting just out of reach. My pulse quickened. "What do you want?" I whispered, half hoping for a reply. Instead, the shadow vanished down another hallway. I had to follow. I had no choice. I took a deep breath, urging myself forward. Each step echoed loudly, a reminder that I was utterly alone. The hallway led me to a door at the end, slightly ajar. I pushed it open and felt the air shift like a cold hand gripping my shoulder. Inside, I discovered a room cluttered with old tools and forgotten trinkets, but my attention was snagged by something else, a framed photograph hanging crooked on the wall. As I approached, a chill shot through me. The smile in the photo was unmistakable. It was Kyle, standing in front of the very farmhouse, laughing with a group of kids. But behind him, in the shadows, a figure lurked. I squinted, feeling a surge of recognition. Then, everything went dark. A sudden force slammed the door shut behind me. The lantern flickered wildly before extinguishing completely. I was plunged into blackness, the whispers now rising in a chaotic symphony around me. "Help!" I cried, grasping for anything familiar. Panic turned to desperation as I stumbled forward, but there was nothing, just darkness and those haunting whispers, growing louder, demanding my attention. What had Kyle done? And why were they now calling to me? I stood there, paralyzed by the darkness. The whispers grew into a dissonant chorus, pressing against my ears. I felt the walls inching closer, the air thick with a malevolence I couldn't see but could sense. "Think, Leah," I muttered to myself. I was alone, but I had to stay calm. The lantern sat cold in my hands, useless now, but somehow I still clung to it. I closed my eyes, trying to silence the chaos and focus on something, anything. The laughter from the living room jolted me back. Hadn't I just come from there? Where were my friends? I turned, cautiously feeling the wall beside me, searching for the door. I didn't want to imagine what might lurk just out of view, waiting for me to make a move. My fingers brushed against a cold doorknob. I hesitated, then twisted it, praying it would turn. It clicked loudly in the silence. The door swung open, and I squinted into the dim light that trickled inside. I edged through, feeling the chill of the room seep into my bones. As I stepped back into the hall, the whispers faded, replaced by an uneasy stillness. The laughter now felt like a taunt. Where had everyone gone? I was terrified at the thought of being so lost in this house that felt almost alive. I crept toward the living room, peeking in. The couch was empty, the blanket tossed aside. A soft breeze rustled the curtains, and something caught my eye. A shadow darted beyond the window. I froze, my heart slamming against my ribcage. I had to know what it was. Pushing against the threshold, I glanced outside. The yard was drenched in moonlight. Shadows twisted around the trees, but nothing stirred. My hope flickered low. I didn't have time to dwell. "Guys?" My voice cracked as I stepped back into the house. "Where are you?" I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. The air felt charged, vibrating with an unseen tension. I turned toward the stairs, where the whispers seemed to beckon. My legs felt heavy, each step forward a battle against my instinct to run. Halfway up, a door creaked open above me. I paused, the sound sending a jolt through me. "Is someone there?" I called out, But again, silence answered. I began to ascend, each creaking step feeling like a challenge. The whispers returned, muffled yet insistent. I reached the landing and saw that one door was slightly ajar, a thin line of darkness around it. What was behind it? With shaking hands, I pushed the door open. Inside, the room was untouched by time, a dusty relic from years gone by. A bed leaned against the wall, and clothes were strewn about, as if someone had left in a hurry. But on the floor, my gaze was drawn to something strange, a piece of cloth, torn and stained. I bent down, the chill of realization washing over me. It was from Kyle's jacket. Then I heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible whisper. My name, Leah. I shot up, heart racing. The darkness thickened, pressing in around me. Something was watching, waiting for me to make a move, and the only way out was deeper into the house. What had Kyle done, and why was I the one being called? Suddenly, a loud crash echoed down the hallway. I needed to know. I needed to find out the truth. I took a step back from the door, my breath caught in my throat. The crash resounded again, followed by a low, grating sound. It felt like it came from the direction of the kitchen. I had to move, had to see what was happening. I glanced at the torn piece of cloth still in my hand, each stain a reminder of Kyle. Slipping it into my pocket, I steeled myself and headed toward the kitchen. The whispers returned, more insistent now, as though they were urging me to hurry. A warning or a lure, I couldn't tell. With each step, the air grew colder. I reached the kitchen door and paused, my hand resting on the frame. The sounds had stopped, but I could still feel something lingering in the silence. Pushing the door open, I stepped inside. The moonlight spilled through the window, illuminating a mess on the floor. Broken dishes littered the tiles, their fragments glinting like teeth. I moved cautiously, scanning the room for any sign of movement. "Hello?" I called, my voice trembling. Nothing answered, but the feeling of being watched grew heavier. I wanted to turn and run, but the need to find my friends was stronger. I crossed the kitchen, cautiously stepping over the shards of glass, and made my way to the back door. It stood ajar, swinging slightly, as if inviting me outside. What was happening out there? I hesitated, mind racing with possibilities. Just then, a faint sound drifted in from the yard, a low growl that sent chills down my spine. I had to see. I stepped out into the night air, the cool breeze mixing with the warmth of fear. The yard was empty, but the shadows shifted unnaturally, making my skin prickle. The ground crunched under my feet as I walked further out, squinting toward the tree line. That's when I saw it, a figure lurking just beyond the first row of trees, watching me. "Guys," I called again, my voice shaking. No reply came, only the rustling of leaves. I took a step back, heart pounding. The figure shifted slightly before moving away from the trees. It felt wrong, unnatural. A wave of dread washed over me, but I couldn't ignore the pull toward the unknown. I had to find out if it was one of my friends or something else entirely. I moved closer, breath hitching as I closed the distance. Each step felt like it could be my last. Just as I began to see the figure more clearly, a scream pierced the night, a desperate cry that echoed through the air. It wasn't just any scream. It was Kyle. Panic surged through me. I turned back toward the house, adrenaline kicking in hard. I had to get back inside. I sprinted, the door slamming behind me as I locked it tight. The house felt like an entity of its own now, the whispers morphing into cries of torment. Then, silence fell. The pressure in the air mounted until it was unbearable. I didn't know what was waiting for me, but I was sure I wouldn't be alone for much longer. And then, from the other side of the door, someone knocked. The knock echoed through the silence, sharp and jarring. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. My instincts screamed to stay away, yet a part of me was drawn to the door. Maybe it was one of my friends. "Who's there?" I forced the words out, my voice barely above a whisper. No answer came, only the soft creak of the old wood beneath the pressure of the added weight. Or maybe that was just my imagination. The air felt thick, heavy with unspoken fears. I took a step back, my eyes glued to the door, as if I could will whatever was on the other side to reveal itself. Another knock, louder this time, sent a shudder through me. I moved cautiously toward the door. Each step tested my resolve. The whispers rose again, no longer soft, but urgent, almost pleading. I reached for the knob, hesitated, then pulled away as a surge of instinct told me to run. Just as I was about to back away, a voice broke through the night, a voice I recognized, but it sent chills down my spine. "Let me in, please!" It was Kyle's voice, frantic and desperate. But something about it felt off. I had just heard his scream outside. Was he really outside now? Was this a trick? I hesitated, my heart twisting in confusion. The voice continued, filling the air. "Please, I'll explain everything. I just need to get in." As the urgency of his plea seeped into my thoughts, I felt a sudden rush of anger and fear. "Why should I trust you?" I shouted back, pressing my palms against the cool wood of the door. The silence that followed felt loaded. I could hear the faint rustling of something in the kitchen behind me, like the soft scrape of a chair moving. I turned my head slightly, a cold bead of sweat trailing down my spine. "Because I'm scared. I don't know what's happening," Kyle pleaded, his voice cracking. "You know me. You have to believe me." I didn't know what to do. The instinct to protect myself battled with the desire to help my friend. What kind of danger was I facing? Was it really him? Without warning, the door rattled as if something from outside was trying to force its way in. I stumbled back, panic flooding my thoughts. I had to make a decision, and I had to make it fast. Suddenly, a shrill scream shattered the stillness. It was different than before, high-pitched and filled with terror. It rang out from the direction of the back door. I hesitated, glancing between the door where Kyle's voice came from and the back exit where the scream had erupted. Whatever was happening, it was escalating quickly. Time stretched as I stood frozen, feeling the weight of the choices bearing down on me. I had to figure out what was real and what was a trap. As I turned back to the back door, something dark slithered past the window, catching my eye. My heart dropped. I wasn't alone in the house. I rushed back to the front door, ready to confront the truth, whatever it was. But then I realized the knocking had stopped. The whispers returned, this time louder, almost mocking. And I was left wondering what I had really invited in. I stood there, frozen in the shifting shadows of the hall. The weight of silence wrapped around me like a thick fog, suffocating and disorienting. The fear that had me rooted suddenly morphed into an unsettling curiosity. The loud thud from the back door echoed in my mind. Someone or something was out there. But Kyle's voice, desperate and familiar, still tugged at me. I couldn't leave him out there. But was it him? Wavering, I glanced back at the front door, now an uncertain barrier between the known and the unknown. I had to act fast. I decided I wouldn't engage with whatever dark presence lingered outside. I turned away from the door and hurried to the kitchen, wanting to grab my phone. I needed help. As I stepped cautiously on the creaky floor, the soft rustling from earlier was now louder, more distinct. I was not alone. but the shadows danced around the corners of my vision, leaving their exact source obscured. I grabbed my phone from the charging station, praying it had enough battery. As I turned around, the hairs on my arms stood on end. I glanced over my shoulder, scanning the room for signs of intruders. That's when I saw it. A figure stood in the corner of the kitchen, shrouded in dim light. My heart raced as I did a double take. It flickered, almost like a hologram. I squinted, and it suddenly vanished, swallowed by the darkness. Confusion flooded my mind. Had I imagined it? I shook my head, dismissing the doubt. I had to keep my wits about me. The whispers grew louder, wrapping around my thoughts like chains. They twisted, becoming a muddled chorus that pressed against my ears, stinking of despair. In a flash of resolve, I stepped out of the kitchen and back into the living room. I need to face Kyle, confront him. Maybe if I opened the door just a bit, I could see his face. If he really was out there, I could judge the truth for myself. As I reached the door and gripped the knob, my phone buzzed violently in my hand. I almost dropped it. The screen lit up, revealing a text. "Don't trust him." My breath hitched as I realized it was from my sister. But how did she know? Just as I started to process the implications, a loud crash from the back door startled me. An urgent pounding filled the house, drowning out the whispers. Each bang reverberated with force, rattling the very foundation. Someone was trying to break in. Panic surged again, and urgency gripped me tighter than before. I had to make a choice. I turned to the back door, heart racing. I wanted to check, to confront whatever or whoever was out there. But just as I approached, the pounding stopped abruptly. The silence that followed felt like a wretched breath held in suspense, waiting for something to snap. Then, from the darkness of the hallway, a figure stepped forward, and everything I thought I knew began to unravel. I squinted into the dim light, trying to make out the figure that had emerged from the shadows. It stood there, motionless, shrouded in uncertainty. Was it really him, or was it some darker illusion? I took a hesitant step back, heart hammering in my chest. "Who are you?" I shouted, my voice trembling despite my efforts to sound brave. The figure didn't answer, but took a slow, deliberate step forward. My mind raced through every horror movie I'd ever seen. This was the point where the protagonist faced their darkest fears. As the figure stepped into the light, I felt a rush of relief, quickly mixed with confusion. It was Kyle, but something was wrong. His eyes were wide, almost wild, and he was drenched in sweat as if he had run for miles. There were scratches on his arms, and his clothes were torn. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words emerged. I noticed his gaze flicking back toward the hallway, as if he was afraid of something lurking just behind him. "Help me," he finally gasped, his voice strained. "They're here." I felt a shiver run down my spine. My instinct screamed at me to slam the door shut, but I couldn't abandon him. "What happened?" I asked, trying to buy time, my mind racing for a plan. He swallowed nervously. I don't know. I was out. Something followed me. I thought I'd be safe here, but—" He trailed off, his eyes darting. "Something?" I pressed, adrenaline coursing through me. Before he could answer, a growl echoed from beyond the door. It was deep and guttural, sending shockwaves of fear through me. I was torn. Should I let Kyle in or protect myself from whatever was outside? "Please, we need to get out of here," Kyle urged, taking a step closer, desperation etched on his face. His words caught in my throat. "What's out there?" Before he could respond, the growl morphed into a chorus of whispers, echoing against the walls. The sound crept under my skin, twisting into a sickening chant that brushed against the edges of my sanity. The whispers mentioned me by name. They twisted my thoughts into spirals of doubt. "They're watching," Kyle said, his voice trembling. "You have to trust me. We have to get away." Just then, I caught a glimpse of movement in the hallway behind him. A shadow flickered. Something was coming. "We need to go," I found myself shouting. Kyle turned, eyes wide with fear. "Don't move." But it was already too late. An unseen force rippled through the house, shaking the very walls. I could feel it, pressing against me like a heavy weight, urging me to surrender. "Kyle!" I screamed. In that moment of chaos, the front door swung open behind me. I barely had time to react. A black figure loomed in the doorway, silhouette sharp against the dim light. My pulse thundered in my ears as I turned to face whatever horror awaited us. And then, with a sudden flash of realization, I understood. Whatever was haunting us had been lurking far longer than I ever imagined. The figure in the doorway stepped forward, the shadows swirling around it like smoke. I could barely breathe as I recognized its eyes, dark, soulless, and utterly familiar. My mind raced back to that night 8 years ago, when Kyle and I had wandered into the old farm, laughing and carefree. He thought he could conquer the world with a prank, but whatever was there had been waiting, patiently. "Kyle!" I shouted, panic clawing at my throat as I turned to him. "What did you do at the farm?" "Don't think about that now," he snapped. But there was something in his voice that felt off. "We have to get out." The dark figure inched closer, its movement slow and deliberate. Fear clutched at my insides. I could sense its chill, like ice running through my veins. I turned back to Kyle. "What's happening? What did you bring back?" "I didn't mean to," he yelled, his eyes wild. "This was all a mistake." The whispers intensified, filling the room with their unbearable chant. My mind struggled against the noise. I forced myself to focus. "We need to move, now," I said, inching toward the side door. But as I turned, I noticed it. The black figure wasn't just standing there anymore. It had shifted, floating closer, arms stretching unnaturally long, fingers outstretched, as if trying to pull me in. "Run!" I screamed, gripping Kyle's arm. We raced for the side door, but the air thickened, pressing down on us. It felt like running through sludge. I glanced back, and the figure transformed, melding into the darkness of the hallway. Just beyond, glowing eyes popped into view, countless, watching, waiting. "No!" Kyle shouted, but it felt like a distant echo now. The whispers exploded into a frenzy, filling every space of my thoughts. "We were never supposed to leave! You can't escape!" I yanked Kyle outside, the night air hitting us like a cold slap. But freedom was short-lived. The ground beneath us trembled, and the whispers morphed into screams. I tried to pull Kyle further away, but he stumbled, looking back at the house. "What if it's not following us?" he asked, eyes wide with regret. "It won't stop," I urged, tugging him down the path we had taken only hours before. "We can't look back." We reached the tree line and paused to catch our breath, but the sense of safety dissipated. The whispers blended into the wind, merging with the rustling leaves around us. I could feel it, the overwhelming sense of being pursued, of something dark and unforgiving just behind us. Then it happened. I glanced over my shoulder, half dreading what I'd see. That's when I saw it. The glowing eyes from the shadows were no longer just illusions. They were lit against the moonlight, stalking us through the trees. My stomach dropped as fear squeezed my heart. "Run!" I shouted, adrenaline fueling my flight. Kyle grabbed my arm. "Where? What do we do?" And just like that, something sharp and heavy crashed down behind us, shaking the ground once more. The forest around us transformed into a trap, We were being hunted, but by what? I didn't know how we could escape, but we had to try. Whatever was at the farm had returned, and it wasn't done with us yet. We tore through the trees, branches clawing at us like fingers of the night. I felt like we were running in circles, or maybe we were stuck in a nightmare that had no end. Kyle and I had always been close, but in that moment, I felt a rift between us. "Do you even remember what you did?" I gasped, trying to push the words through my burning lungs. His face was pale in the moonlight. "I thought it was just a legend. I didn't believe." "Believing doesn't change what's happening now," I shot back, unable to contain my anger. "You brought something back with us." Ahead of us, the path forked. To the left, the ground descended into a jagged ravine. To the right, it climbed toward the rocky hill where the old barn still stood. I hesitated, gauging our options. "Which way?" Kyle panted. "We can't keep running like this." Before I could respond, something blotted out the moonlight above us. I looked up, and the figure was there, gliding between the tree branches, its elongated arms reaching. Panic seized me, and I yanked Kyle toward the right. I didn't care where we were going, I just wanted distance from that creature. We stumbled along the path, the sound of footsteps behind us echoing like thunder. The whispers morphed into tortured cries, growing louder as we approached the barn. Shadows melded into grotesque shapes, and every cracked branch felt like a warning. "Wait!" Kyle shouted, but I didn't stop. I burst through the barn door, dragging him in behind me. The heavy wooden door slammed shut, and the sound reverberated through the hollow space. We finally caught our breath, lungs heaving. "What do we do now?" Kyle breathed, his eyes darting around the dark, musty interior. "We find a way to block the door. Whatever it is, it won't stop." I scanned the room for anything useful. Old crates lined the walls, and in the dim light, I noticed a forked stick tucked between them. I rushed over and grabbed it. It felt solid and gave me a sliver of confidence. "We can use this to brace the door," I said, hurrying back to Kyle. But as I approached the entrance, a low growl rumbled from outside. My heart raced as the sound mixed with the whispers. I thrust the stick against the door, wedging it as firmly as I could. "Maybe it won't," Kyle began. But before he could finish, the door splintered inwards, sending us both tumbling backward. The figure loomed in the doorway, an impossible shadow filled with rage. It reached out, fingers like knives slicing the air. "Run!" I screamed again. We dashed further into the barn, fueled by fear and desperation. I didn't know what else to do. In the dim light, I spotted an old window. "There," I pointed, but as we scrambled toward it, something heavy crashed just inches from us, scattering hay and debris. Then, through the chaos, I noticed something glinting on the ground, a small, ornate box half buried in dust. Instinctively, I knelt to pick it up, curiosity overruling my reason. That's when everything went dark. I blinked back, staggering confusion, finding myself thrust into an eerie void where shadows danced like flames. The box slipped from my fingers, clattering against the barn floor, its lid partially open. Inside was a tattered piece of parchment, and my eyes widened as I scanned the words scrawled in hasty ink. It looked like a ritual, a way to break whatever curse had come from the farm. "Leah, what are you doing?" Kyle's voice pulled me back to the moment, but the growls outside seemed to intensify, echoing like a threatening whisper. I grasped the box tighter, as if it could shield me from the encroaching dark. "When the sun rises," I read aloud, "you must speak the names of those who remain lost here." It didn't make sense, but something about it sparked a glimmer of hope. "There's no time! It's coming!" Kyle shouted with panic lacing his usual bravado, but my hands moved by instinct. "Help me!" I insisted, pulling him closer.
We need to read this together." Suddenly, the door creaked under an unseen pressure, splinters flying as the figure pushed through. Its face was a swirling mass of shadows and torment, half-formed, and I felt dread pooling in my stomach. Kyle gripped my hand tightly, and I focused on the words, forcing them from my lips as if they could weave a powerful spell. "We call to those lost," I began, "to Kyle, and to those who wander." Each name I recited felt alive, as though the very essence of the farm shifted around us, a response to my call. The growls morphed into howls, reverberating, pleading, as the figure flickered between threatening and retreating. "Leah, this isn't working!" Kyle exclaimed, and fear flooded his voice. Ignoring him, I pressed on, my voice gaining strength. "To those bound by sorrow, we seek your release." The creature recoiled, almost as if it was testing the limits of its own power, struggling against the bonds that tied it to the darkness. But even as Kyle and I pressed forward, sweat beading at our foreheads, I felt an unsettling sensation in my gut, a realization that perhaps this entity was once human too. Perhaps a lost child of the farm, overwhelmed by desperate choices made in innocence. Without warning, the box began to vibrate, a pulse underscoring my words. The shadows coiling around the barn felt more alive, swirling like a tempest, fighting against the bonds of their own despair. "They're desperate, just like us," I murmured, guilt coursing through me for naming only the ghosts of my childhood. And then the creature shrieked, a sound that pierced through the darkness.
I didn't dare look away, my heart hammering. A burst of energy ignited the barn as light surged from the box, illuminating the shadows surrounding us. The whispers quieted, and for a brief moment I thought I saw faces emerge, caught between the realms of the living and the dead. "Leah, come on," Kyle echoed, urging me toward the window. I had to finish. "Please." But my heart stirred, recognizing that perhaps the stories weren't meant to end. Wasn't that the price Kyle had paid for his wish years ago? I reached my hand back toward him, feeling the pull of the past, but the shadows surged in a deafening roar as they prepared to reclaim what was theirs. I closed my eyes and released the final words. "To our past, let them go free." The barn shuddered, collapsing around us with a rumble that matched my doubts. And then it hit. The explosion of light engulfed us, breaking through the veil of terror. I awoke sprawled on the forest floor, sunlight pouring down in gentle rays, illuminating the trees. Kyle lay next to me, unconscious but breathing. As I pulled myself upright, the barn was gone, replaced by a clearing that smelled of fresh earth and freedom. But my heart raced with uncertainty. Standing up, I scanned the serene landscape, hoping that my plea had worked, yet still feeling the weight of unanswered questions. Had we truly broken the cycle, or was the darkness still lurking, waiting to rise again? I felt the whispers of the forest around me, echoing in subtle ways, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the deal Kyle made wasn't quite over. The world felt different, yet the air still tinged with some lingering sadness. Gripping the ornate box tightly, I acknowledged the remnants of the night's terror, the faces of the damned that might follow us forever, or be freed at last. Maybe, just maybe, our choices still lingered, shifting underneath the surface of reality, waiting to be uncovered. I glanced back at Kyle and took a steadying breath. The truth was still out there. It felt too complicated for closure. But perhaps one day I would find a way to understand it. Until then, I turned toward the path leading us out of the forest, ready to face whatever lay ahead.